Hello, everyone, and welcome to Proof Talks, where we unpack real world expertise through the stories, decisions, and lessons that help shape professional judgment. I'm your host, Ashley Smith. Today's conversation starts with a challenge many growing businesses face. From the outside, things look successful. The clients are there, the team is busy, the business is moving. But behind the scenes, too much depends on the founder. Too many decisions, too many relationships, and too much pressure are still flowing through one person. And at some point, that doesn't just limit the founder, it limits the business. Today, I'm joined by Murray Smith, an Australian leadership strategist and certified EOS Implementer. EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System, a practical system for helping leadership teams create more clarity, accountability, and consistent execution. Murray works with fast-growing and complex organizations to cut through friction, align leadership teams, and build the discipline needed to actually follow through on strategy. He brings a perspective shaped by law enforcement, senior executive roles across regulatory and integrity bodies, and an MBA from MIT. Today, he helps business owners and leadership teams move beyond firefighting and founder dependence into a more disciplined way of operating. In this conversation, we're going to unpack the story of a creative agency founder who was wearing too many hats, ultimately bottlenecking his own success, and what it took to build a team and structure that could run without him at the center of everything. We'll talk about what Murray noticed, where the real friction was showing up, what had to change, and what founders and operators can learn from the uncomfortable but necessary work of building something that is not dependent on one person. Murray, I'm so glad to have you here. Welcome to Proof Talks.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. Great to be here. That's quite an introduction. I hope I live up to it.
Well, I really appreciate it. I mean, the purpose of this show is to really try to dive in and understand sort of the perspective of the folks who are in it every day. And
Yeah.
so I do think there's value in giving a bit of foundation for our audience. Before we dive into this particular client scenario that you helped with, why don't you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and maybe break down a little bit about what is EOS, because it might be a new concept for some people.
Sure. So I come from a family of engineers. My dad was the chief engineer on the Melbourne tug services here in Australia, but I didn't, and he started an engineering business on the side because he had a lot of part-time shift work. My two brothers got into that business. I didn't, simply because I didn't like having grease on my hands. So I didn't go into the family business. From there, I completed my studies in secondary school, high school, and got accepted into chemical engineering, realised I'd end up on oil rigs with greasy hands, so I didn't do that. I dropped out of university, and my mother said, well, if you're going to drop out of university, you better get a job. So after bouncing around on a couple of jobs for a couple of months, I ended up in Victoria Police for 15 years, which was great fun. Didn't know what day I got paid, had a lot of, but was confronted with a number of serious injuries along the way, which resulted in me thinking, what can I do if I can't do this? So I went back and started studying part-time. And then once I completed my master's program, 14 years later, left Victoria Police and was in executive and senior management roles, restructuring and setting up organisations. Went overseas to work out if I could study overseas. I did an executive program at Harvard, came back. Then I applied to go back to Harvard and MIT, and, first world problem, got into both, had to make a decision, decided to go to MIT, got my MBA, returned to Australia, and was really frustrated in executive roles. So a friend of mine handed me a copy of the book Traction, which is what EOS is based on. He said, I think you'd make a great implementer. Why don't you read this book? I did. As a result of that, I became an implementer in December 2018. And from there, I've been working with businesses around Australia to help them improve. And it's great to be on your podcast just to help your audience understand that some of the issues they face are global issues, right? Business is business, no matter where you might be in the world. And I suspect a lot of the things we talk about today will resonate with your audience in terms of them saying, well, we suffer the same fate. So EOS, briefly, it's not an IT platform or anything like that. It's just a management practice to develop three things in a business. It's really about vision, traction, and healthy. So getting everyone 100% on the same page and know where you're going and how you're going to get there. That's the vision part. The traction part is seeing your vision being executed every day and people being accountable to that. And healthy is just, you're having the conversations that matter rather than leaving those elephants in the room and no one's really talking about them. And with that, when the leadership team embrace that, the rest of the organisation will follow. So it's a simple and effective suite of tools that allow people to execute on their business and not be a slave to a process.
So tell us a little bit about your client that came to you,
Mm,
this
yeah.
creative agency founder. Give us a little bit of a snapshot. Like, where were they? What
Yeah.
sort of challenges were they seeing at that time?
So they were a well-established creative agency, regionally based, and they had a reasonably large team, but they were scaling back. And the reason they were scaling back is because the market had changed. They were supporting a particular industry that had a bit of a drop-off in terms of ability to generate revenue, and so the market had changed for them. What hadn't changed, though, was because they'd been so successful, that success had actually papered over some of the issues in the business that had stopped them growing. It's the old story, you've got lots of revenue coming in, you think everything's great and there's no problems, but when your business is tested, that's when you find out where the gaps are. And so for this business, it was founder led, and everything was going through the founder. And equally, the founder was sitting in a number of different seats in the business. And by that, there wasn't too much in the business that he wasn't touching, whether it was finance, sales, everyday operations, HR, the whole lot. Now, with that in mind, he had a very talented team, but it's just the way it had always run. And so that was going to be a problem for scaling. Now, luckily, the founder, really nice fellow, also had the ability to self-reflect and think, well, now that the market's changed, I've got to build this business differently. And I'm actually the inhibitor.
Hmm.
And he wanted to do that. And he wasn't exactly sure how to do that. And that's when he spoke to me about what's EOS and how does that work. And that's how that conversation started. So it's not always the case that working with businesses that are just starting out or whatever it is. In fact, we prefer not to work with startups because you've got to be really clear about what your product is. If you're not clear on that, EOS won't help you because it's all about execution. So you've got to be really clear on what your market is and what your product is. In Brad's case, his business has been around for about 20 years.
So tell me a little bit about that founder's mindset of this creative
Mm,
agency. He clearly came to you. I actually was doing a little homework on your site, and I saw that he was familiar with this
yeah,
EOS sort of framework and had
yeah,
maybe even read some books on it and liked
yeah.
it, and it spoke to him. But he clearly wasn't sure how to navigate it without some support. And
Mm,
so, for someone like that coming to you, is he coming to you saying, "You know what? I realize that I'm the challenge here." Does he know exactly what those challenges are? Like that he doesn't know how to transition perhaps certain skills or let
yeah,
go of
yeah,
certain being able to be in control. Like what are the sorts of things you see with founders like him that are like it's clearly
yeah,
some awareness, but they need to
yeah.
take that next step?
So I think it's more about most of the people that I talk to want to take the next step, and it's taking the next step that's really difficult. And to your point, a lot of it is about, yeah, they would love to let go, but they don't have the confidence to let go because there's no structure in the business to allow them to see that the work can get done without the right structures in place. And that sounds really simple, but in essence, it's really difficult too. If you sit back and then try and think as a founder led, right, I'm going to put structures in this business and I'm going to lead this. Inevitably, the entire business can be put offside by a couple of things, which will be one, oh, this is just a bright, shiny new object that's been seen and this will go away in the next month. Two, everyone will sit there and nod and go, okay, because that's what the founder says. So that's what we'll do sort of thing. And rather than, that healthy conversations and challenge. So there's the unknown about how to get from point A to point B, but also if I'm going to get to point B, what does that look like for me? What's my role in this business? So there's a lack of knowledge about what that might look like. They're not really sure how to do it, or even if they are sure how to do it, they're not sure how it'll be received if it's coming from them. Now, with that in mind, everything that I do with EOS can be self-implemented and has been done successfully by a lot of businesses. But the problem is sometimes, as some people like to say, it's hard to read the label on the jar when you're inside it. So you have to overcome that. And I think certainly in this case, Brad was smart enough to realize that I don't have the skills to take this to where it needs to be done. And that's why he engaged me. And of course, he knew about EOS because I was referred to him by another business that was running on EOS that was servicing him in their technology space.
So I'm curious about that just in terms of how you get in and help. Are you walking them through things that are more strategic in nature or operational in nature, given the name EOS? Like, are you
Yeah.
helping them? How do you help them determine, where are these major pain points? And
Yeah.
like, are you handholding them through transition, or are you helping them ask themselves like the right kinds of questions?
It's a bit of both, Ashley. So initially, it's asking some really basic questions before we actually get into EOS. So for Brad and everyone else that I work with, when they come to me and say, "Oh, I'm thinking of running on EOS," my first question is, "Why do you think you need to run on EOS?" And really sort of understanding where they're at. And said, "Well, what would happen if you didn't run on EOS? And in 12 months from now, what does success look like to you?" And then I can get a sense of where they're at and what the problems are. And then once we're into, if they decide that this is something they do, there's a bit of a process there that we go through to make sure everyone's on the same page. But once we start implementing, it's really about breaking it into 6 key components. And that's, none of this is surprising. None of this is, wow, that's amazing. I've never heard that before. But it's about the execution of it. So it's really about, let's make sure everyone's clear on these 6 key components. So the first one being vision. Is everyone 100% on the same page? They know where you're going and how you're going to get there. And there's a tool that we use to build that up, to basically have a business plan on a 2-page document that says this is the way you run your business. And that's the cornerstone of what they do. So there's the strategic part, if you like. And then there's the people component, which is really making sure that everyone understands their accountabilities and you've got the right people in the right seat. So, part of that is, do they meet the standards of the business? And we set the standards, so those core values, if you like. And then we set up the accountability chart, which is all about making sure everyone understands what they're accountable for and what they need to deliver to. And then we move to data, which is like run your business off the numbers, not gut feel. And there's a number of data points that we set up with that, scorecards and measurables, if you like. And then we make sure that people solve issues. That's the 4th component. How many times have you been in a business and, they're talking about the same thing 3 or 4 months later? Didn't we talk about that last month?
Hmm.
Like, I'm sure all your audience have faced that. And EOS gives you a way to solve these issues so they go away forever. But that's not a promise to say there'll be no issues in your business. That's just a promise to say you'll be able to deal with them. And then you move into process and finally traction, which is really about, making sure you've got a rhythm and executing to that rhythm. So for Brad, it was about putting that structure in place. And working through those strategic and operational matters, giving him the confidence to say, hey, I've employed all these people to do their job. How about I let them do their job? And that was the shift for him. And for the team, it was about having the clarity to know, oh, this is where we're going. These are my accountabilities. These are the numbers I need to hit. If I've got an issue, I can raise it in a meeting. Let's solve the issue. Let's have processes in place so, there's not a vacuum. We actually can develop a level of consistency, and let's keep repeating this regularly so it becomes the way we work.
I'm going to want to dig a little bit into how that process felt and what you saw from with this particular client. But maybe before we dive into that, you can share a little bit about the transformation that this client saw, so that way when listeners are hearing, they can understand that this really had an impact.
Yeah. So for Brad and his team, the first impact was clarity. They understood what they needed to execute on, but not just what was in the founder's head being Brad. Everyone across the business knew where they were going and how they were going to get there, and all the things I mentioned earlier. And what that meant for Brad was, as I mentioned earlier, the confidence to let go needs to be there. The structure needs to be there. Well, the structure was there, as was the goals, as what needed to be done, where we were taking this thing, and a way to solve problems without him. So what does that result in? Brad could actually walk out of the business for 5 weeks and he didn't have to check in. And the business was fine. And the business grew. And it really worked well for him. And he was able to do something that he couldn't do for years. For a very long time, Brad had to be there with his hands on the wheel all the time. And now he could step away from the business and just let it run. I remember when it happened at one quarterly where I meet businesses every 90 days. He said, yeah, look, I'm going away for 5 weeks. And he was a bit apprehensive about it, to be honest. And then the next 90 days when I saw them, he was an entirely different person. His entire demeanor was different. He was relaxed. He was ready to go. He had new ideas. He could drive the business forward. He could really own his seat, which was about looking over the horizon and understand what's next. He could do all those things that he previously thought he was doing well, but he could actually do them better.
So, I mean, this is a bit of a side note, but clearly, I mean, obviously that has an impact on that business owners live work balance, but
Yeah.
also might impact their leadership style moving forward, because
Yes.
they're able to, not be
Yeah.
constantly stressed out and have
Yeah.
more confidence in their team and their business running, which is great. I'd like to think back a little bit to that period of time when you were working with him. What kind of signals were you seeing that might have indicated to you like, okay, this part might be a little bit tougher and we're really going to need to focus on, like, was it around that trust or the transition to letting go, and then how did you help him get along and move forward?
Yeah. There was a number of things going on in the business that were flags, if you like, not bad flags, but things that we knew that we needed to address. And the first one was, yeah, he was nervous. And to alleviate that, it was about putting in place the right structure, and I'll refer back to the accountability chart that made it clear about who was holding the ball, who was accountable for what. And once that clarity was given, because that required a conversation to say, okay, well, if you're accountable for that, what does that mean? What does that look? And then there'd be discussions at the leadership team to say, oh, really? I thought, Ben was accountable for that. No, that's it. And so there was a lot of conversations at the leadership team to actually get the clarity that was needed, because before that it was kind of like, oh, well, we'll just ask Brad. He'll tell us what's going on. And so that was the first step. And when that was in play, then it was about, okay, well, what numbers do we need to hit every week to make this business, to understand whether it's healthy or not? And as we were going through that process, so now we had who's accountable for what, then we had, okay, what numbers do we need to hit weekly to make sure that we're okay? It was almost as if that fog was taken out of the room, and it also allowed the leadership team to step up. So previously they would do what they were asked to do, and they were talented people, but now we're asking them to step up into a leadership role, and they could do that with confidence to say, well, now I know what I'm accountable for. This is where the business is going. Here's the numbers I need to hit. I now know what I need to do in my role. It was almost like the shift, if you like, in the room, like the leadership team would be becoming a leadership team, and Brad was having the ability to say, I'm okay with this. I'm happy with this team. So they were probably the things that I saw most, was about that nervousness of letting go, and the leadership team actually having the ability to step up to the plate. Now, there was a couple of things that we did along the way with that, and that was like really challenging them hard. Like, should you be in this room? Are you really up for this? And so one thing I know about EOS is I've never started and finished with the same leadership team. There's always a shift. Some people love it, some people don't, and some people, their ceiling isn't the leadership team. They might be great operators technically, but they're not really up for leading. So all those scenarios played out, and the leadership team changed in size and personnel. That's part of the journey, right? People make selections.
Yeah, so just to clarify, you don't mean just a shift in how that leadership team showed up and how they saw themselves, but an actual shift in potentially
Who
like
was on it?
different
Yeah.
roles. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you sort of addressed my question. I was wondering, you typically then would be engaged in sort of a facilitation type role where with
Mm,
the leadership team. Is that
yeah.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And are there cases sometimes where you do ask the person who brought you in, whether it's the founder or CEO, to kind of like give a little bit of, I don't know, freedom without them in the room to kind of peel the
Yeah.
layers back?
So that goes to the healthy rules. How we operate in the room is, you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And the talking to the visionary or any member of the leadership team is always done in front of the leadership team, because we're meant to be developing this healthy space that allows people to be their true self. So yes, visionaries, I have pulled them up and said, you need to let go, or words to that effect. You can insert particular words that might be suitable to encourage people to let go. So yes, that happens a lot. It's also really about, my role is not just facilitation. It's about being a teacher and a coach as well. So teach the tools, facilitate the session, but also coach them through those hard parts, which is like, asking those questions they don't want people to ask, and say, well, what was that about? Why are you doing that? That's not in line with your core values. You said you wanted to be this and you're not now. Should we just change the numbers or what? So it's really pushing them hard to make sure they do it. So yes, push visionaries hard, but I push everyone hard, because I want them to be great. And being great doesn't come easy. If everyone could be great, EOS wouldn't exist, right? But it does. Why? Because it's hard for people to get to great. And to do that, they need to be pushed.
Do you see then in these kinds of conversations aha moments that
Mm.
maybe weren't anticipated, particularly from the leader, like the person who brought you in?
Yeah. So for visionaries, it's very much, what have I been doing? I wish I did this years ago, because they're actually allowing their people to do their job, to actually, they go out and recruit, particularly on leadership teams, heads of sales and marketing, heads of operation, heads of whatever. And they have these fantastic position descriptions that everyone thinks, wow, that'd be an awesome place to work. And when they get there, they find out, oh, I'm really just doing what Murray says. It's not really the role I wanted. And what happens through this process is that the visionary can actually allow the recruitment process to work. So they've recruited all these talented people, let them do their job. And so they have this aha moment when they go, I've given them clarity. They know what they're meant to be doing. They know what numbers they need to hit. They know how to solve issues. Now I have a business that isn't relying on me. And it never, in fact, did in some respects. It didn't have to be like that. But, it's the nature of how businesses start. You start with one or two people generally, and you do everything. Then you bring people on when you grow, and sometimes we forget to let go about doing everything and letting people do their job. And then there's a level of confidence there, like, oh, well, what if they don't need me anymore? If I've got all these people, great. As opposed to, there's a bit of an ego there sometimes about letting go, about what am I meant to do? Well, according to the accountability chart, look over the horizon, see what's next, manage big relationships that could destroy the business, do all the things that are exciting for you, if that's what that is. But equally, I've got other businesses I work with where the founders are in a sales seat because that's what they love to do. They're not actually running the business anymore. It gives them the freedom to do what they really want to do. And so the aha moment is, particularly for Brad, was just like, oh, I've got all these talented people. I can let them go.
I'm sure it's different across organizations and different companies, particularly depending on what stage they're at and how mature they are. But I think when I was first talking to you and looking at what you do, I was thinking a lot more around the sort of in the weeds, like tactical side, operational side. Okay, when you're handing over accountability and you're handing over authority, there's also the like systems part
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and thinking about succession and like making sure, okay, well, if I'm no longer doing this and someone else is leading this part, well, what if they're gone tomorrow?
Yep.
What are we putting in place to make sure I don't have to revert back to like how we were doing this before? So
Yeah.
I'm curious how you think about that. Maybe you can touch on it in this
Yeah.
particular circumstance. Like, what is your advice for that
Yeah.
piece? And what are you seeing people doing well?
Yeah. So I think the thing that assists that greatly is having the right processes in place. When you generally talk about processes, people's eyes roll into the back of their head, so this will be boring. Well, it kind of is in some ways, but it's also the thing that'll set you free. You've got to think about if I was in your business, Ashley, and we weren't running on any particular operating system, EOS or otherwise, and I said, right, I've got this job and I'm going to take it. So it's been great working with you. And there's nothing in place. All that corporate knowledge is walking out the door with me. And you're sitting there feeling exactly as you've just described about how do we protect against that? Well, the first step is have your processes documented, right? So that's really about, but not to the point where it's, 700 pages, that you're just clear on what those core processes are. So if I did get up and leave, they're documented. Like, how do I actually, if I'm in the sales seat, what's the sales process look like? And understanding that, so that's the first step. The second step is really about, have we been clear about what that seat's accountable for? So we all know about position descriptions or job descriptions, whatever they might be called, but nobody looks at them particularly regularly. They might when they sign their contract, and that's about it. So let's really focus on those 5 top accountabilities. So if we know those, we've got our processes documented, and we've got the numbers to say, for this seat to be successful, it needs to hit these measurables. And there might be 3 or 4 numbers for that particular seat. Now, if you've got that, whether I walk out or not, you know what you need to deliver. And on top of that, if you've got your vision sorted out where you know where you need to go, you're right with that. Now, the other thing that comes up is what happens if that happens? Well, it's just an issue. We put it on the issues list and we solve it about succession planning, whatever that looks like. Do we recruit in? I mean, these are conversations that I've had regularly. Some people recruit in. Some people say, well, Bob seems capable of doing that role. Okay, well, and you'll discuss that as an issue and what does a solve look like and all that. So the EOS structure allows you to manage that happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore you can actually not be concerned. It's almost like the insurance policy. It's all there and you've just got to lean into it to make it happen.
And are you
And
finding that it's usually like in this case, is it the person that's being handed the stronger leadership role?
yeah,
Are they the ones typically then responsible for outlining and documenting this structure rather than, because in my mind, I think the hesitation from a founder our like leading operator might be that they have to
Yeah.
do that.
No, yeah, yeah. So the founder doesn't. Everyone has a role to play to build this out, and it's about, well, if you're accountable for that area, build it out. And sure, that doesn't mean do it in isolation. It means come back and check with us and make sure that this is all meeting the needs, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, it's really about empowering the entire team to take control of what they need to do. So the visionary or founder's not sitting there, 2 o'clock in the morning trying to build all this out for someone else. It's a team effort done by the entire organization. Everyone's got a role to play, and it's, clearly as you move up through a business, that responsibility increases. But everyone has a role to play to make sure the business is a success. But we can't get there unless they all know what they're meant to be doing.
Can you
Um,
remind me sort of how long
yeah,
generally did it take to get from, calling you in
yeah,
to, okay, now I'm able to go away for 5
yeah.
weeks and enjoy myself and not be checking my email every 10 minutes?
Yeah. So one of the key, it took Brad about 18 months to get to that point because there's, think about all the things we discussed. There was changes in the leadership team. It was not giving them more work. It was changing the paradigm in which they worked. So just changing how they did their work. So that takes a bit of time to get their head around. So, firstly, the leadership team needs to get there, then the business needs to get there. So that did take a bit of time, but generally EOS in terms of rollout. So for Brad, it was about 18 months and he was able to take that 5-week break. For others, it might be quicker, but generally EOS, when I'm working with businesses, I'm generally with them for about 2 years. Then they get it and they don't need me anymore. So my job is to make me redundant. In other words, that they can run on EOS without me because they should be running on EOS for the rest of their life. It's just whether they run on EOS with an implementer. And my view is once they've got it, they've got it. And that, I'm not going to hang around if I know they can do it without me.
We don't need to get into like the nitty gritty, but generally speaking, in an engagement like that, you're meeting with them like quarterly, or what does that
Yeah.
look?
Yeah. So it's every quarter. And then, so we'll do a couple of annual planning sessions, which are 2 days, but quarterlies are 1 day. So generally it's about a 2-year journey. And then they're generally good from there on. There's some businesses that have me hang around longer than that, and simply because they like someone to come in and, to put it bluntly, whack them when they're not doing what they're meant to be doing. And so they want that accountability. But, by the 2-year mark, most businesses get it. And, it's up to them to decide whether they want that person to come back or whether they can do it themselves. I'm a big fan in getting businesses to do it themselves simply because, that's the whole point, right? Right.
Mhm.
Run your business. Don't
Yeah.
have someone else come in and sort of help you if you don't need the help.
Yeah. I'm wondering, like, obviously, this team was successful.
Mm,
I mean, I saw his testimonial video, so they're
yeah.
quite pleased. I'm sure there's always things to learn along the way. But
Yeah.
whether with this particular business or others, like, did you experience anything where, like, okay, we're a year in, some things are working, and then
Yes.
noticing, oh, okay, maybe we thought we were all on the same page about XYZ, but clearly something's still not quite
Yeah.
aligned.
How that happens actually is like some people will start the journey and go, yeah, I'm all in on this. This is great. And then over time, things will happen, whether there's a shift in their, work life balance, if you like, or there's a shift in, hang on, this isn't exactly where I want to be. Or now that I'm experiencing this is actually, I'm accountable now. Oh, and that isn't fun for some people. So there are shifts. Or alternatively, there are people that think, as you've said, is that what you meant by that? And again, that misalignment is okay because you can actually deal with it. There's a process to deal with that. The system deals with that by saying, okay, well, let's smoke that issue out. Let's put it on the issues list. Let's talk about that. And that's happened a lot, but that's kind of human nature too, because we tend to drift a bit, right? We set something and we say, yeah, that's what we want to be. And then day-to-day activities take over and we drift away from that. And it does take a reminder to bring back to say, no, this is where we're going. Oh yeah, that's where we're going. And sometimes that's all it needs, but sometimes, people leave, right? As well, because they think this isn't for me anymore. They've hit their ceiling, if you like, or they've found their work-life balance is different. That's not to say people are working 100 hours a week to do EOS. They shouldn't be, but it's just that their priorities might shift or they may not no longer be aligned to where the business is going. All that happens, and it's about, all right, let's put it on the table and talk about that. What does that look like? It's even happened in businesses that I've been in, when we've run on EOS, we've had that misalignment happen, and it was at a quarterly, we spoke about that. And, the result was someone left the business. And, And that's okay. Doesn't make them bad people, just means they're not aligned to where you're going.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting things we could dive into. I know these are the types of experiences that business owners and leaders deal with all of the time. And as you said, it's can be very universal. I want to make sure that people listening know how to find you. I will make sure to put your web links in the show
Yes.
notes. If you like your LinkedIn profile, is there anywhere else I should guide people to if they're interested in getting to know you or learning more?
Well, if they're interested in talking to me, then, as you said, LinkedIn or going to my website, grip6.com.au. But equally, if they want to know more about EOS, they can go to EOS Worldwide and check out what EOS is all about. Having said that, I'm also listed there. So if it's find an implementer, you can just throw my name in and I'll come up there as well. But happy to talk to anyone about EOS, wherever they might be, because there's implementers all around the world. If it's not me, we can put you in touch with someone who can.
Well, Marie, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I really admire the work that you're doing. It obviously leaves an impact. And as I said, it's not just about revenue sometimes and profit margins. It
No,
literally has to do with like quality of life and making a business sustainable because you're able to chill out
yeah,
for a little
yep,
bit. So
yep.
I am going to close, but is there anything you'd like, any parting words or anything you'd like to share that you haven't mentioned already?
Well, the only thing I'd say is I say a lot to the businesses that I work with. Don't be motivated, just be consistent. Just keep pushing it out, even when you don't want to do it. And that's what will separate you from the pack.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into Proof Talks, where we unpack real world expertise through real stories. If you're just new to the show, subscribe if you're listening on audio. And if you're on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button or check us out on the other platforms and follow. All right, everybody. Until next time, take care.